brilliant Chinese civilization developed along the banks of the Yellow River 4,000 years ago. But what do we know about the vast lands to the west of the Great Wall? In recent years, excavations in the desert of Taklamakan have revealed an astonishing civilization that lived at the edge of the Chinese Empire 2,500 years ago. The recent discovery of mummies has come to confirm the existence of a people of the desert. Who were they? Were they settlers or nomads? To what civilization did they belong? Taklamakan, a real sensation of being at the end of the world, awaits the traveler who ventures into this violently sand-swept desert. With a name that means the land of no return, it has always terrorized the caravans that had to cross it to reach China, India, or Persia. A relief map shows to what degree the destiny of this region has been shaped by its geography. In the center, the Taklamakan, a basin 1,000 kilometers long by 600 wide, extending from the Gobi Desert and surrounded by mountains that are among the highest and most inaccessible in the world. Torrents flood the slopes of the glaciers, which culminate at a height of more than 7,000 meters, carving out dizzying gorges. Once they reach the foot of the mountains, these rivers irrigate the oases that have developed along the edge of the desert. 10,000 years ago, they crossed right through the Taklamakan. Following geographic and climatic upheavals, their flow has slowed, and now the waters are lost in the sands. Caravans have linked the oases that stretch along the Silk Route between China and the Mediterranean for 2,000 years, the greatest terrestrial communication network in history. Uyghurs, Kyrgyz, Kazakhs, Tajiks, Uzbeks, Mongols, and Han, an incredible mosaic of peoples from Central Asia and China lived in these oases with legendary names: Kashgar, Yarkand, Kucha, Khotan, Keria, Chachan. Great poplar groves are their only protection from the storms that blow 50 days a year and threaten the ancient irrigation system that sections off the crops. Corinne de Ben-Francfort, a French archaeologist and China specialist, fell in love with this region 20 years ago. So she decided to devote herself to the study of the periods that precede the Silk Route, of which we know practically nothing. For the last 12 years, Chinese archaeologists have unearthed funerary sites dating from periods before the Chinese conquest 2,200 years ago. In Jakhonluk, a team led by the archaeologist Wang Bo have found immense communal tombs. But to which culture do these dead belong? Without any signs of a habitat to attach them to, their interpretation remains difficult and incomplete. A researcher at the CNRS, Corinne de Ben-Francfort, has worked for 15 years with the Archaeology Institute of Xinjiang, and its director, Idris Abdurrasul, an archaeologist who comes from the region. In 1991, taking advantage of the reopening of the country to foreign archaeologists, they launched an ambitious project to find traces of the ancient peoples of the Taklamakan. The archaeologists begin by scouting the region before focusing on an unexplored area, the Keria Valley, a tranquil-looking river that today disappears in the sands 250 kilometers away inside the desert. The study of the environment threatened by the dunes led Corinne and Idris to the conclusion that population zones were always concentrated in the deltas. Satellite images reassure them. Near the actual delta, they find traces of ancient dried riverbeds, proof that the bed of the Keria had been displaced over time following tectonic activity. In 1991, a Franco-Chinese mission heads off to explore the length of the Keria. It's in Dakhien, the last oasis inhabited by the Uyghur camel drivers on the delta, that the real expedition begins. The team of archaeologists leaves in autumn, the only season that is favorable for digging the desert, where extreme temperatures prevail. Character and size necessary for the duration of the mission. Guided by the camel drivers who navigate by the color of the sand, the caravan moves onto the dry riverbed of this now lost river. The archaeologists must master this unfamiliar ocean of dunes, where so many caravans have vanished without a trace. They decide to try to find Caradong, an ancient city buried under the sand with the help of cartographic data dating from the beginning of the last century. Sven Hedin, a Swedish geographer, already traveled the region at the end of the 19th century. At that time, the Silk Route began to attract explorers searching for signs of Buddhism and archaeological treasures. Financed by powerful Westerners who had their sights on these unknown lands, these pioneers did not flinch at confronting the Taklamakan. But having underestimated the dangers of the desert, Hedin was met with horrible storms during the course of his first expedition, and 2 of his companions perished en route. Pursuing his project of mapping the region, he set off again 2 years later in 1896 and discovered the ruins of an ancient city, Caradong. But Hedin's map is imprecise. After a month of prospecting in vain, the Franco-Chinese mission is on the point of giving up. At the last minute, a Uyghur shepherd gives them directions to the route to Caradong, the phantom city described by Hedin. A few dried pieces of wood resembling grimacing skeletons are all that remains of this great oasis of the 3rd century AD, on the route linking the north and the south of the Taklamakan. On this spot stood a small fort, probably to house one of the Chinese garrisons that were posted on the steppes of Tyre since the conquest of this region in 200 BC. In finding these first clues, the archaeologists begin their journey back in time.
93年，我们正式开始在克里亚河流域进行调查。首先，我们在喀拉东遗址区进行了调查，发现了有民居、有寺庙遗址，做了一些清理发掘。在清理当中呢，我们发现了很多的这个壁画。
这个房主任。
A displacement of the dunes brought to light the foundations of 2 small sanctuaries. Murals covered with dirt are strewn across the ground. A quick examination confirms that they are Buddhist paintings from the beginning of our era, the oldest ever found in China. The archaeologists know that they will be lost if they are not removed. There are signs of pillaging, And even if the gold diggers don't return, they'll soon be buried by the wind.
Le 29 on l'a, hein. Ça doit être 30.
Il est où le 29?
They start to extract the painting fragments in very bad condition out of the rubble.
Doucement, là.
It's painstaking work. They have to be careful.
Ok. Ah bon. Doucement. Ah.
Jorge Vazquez, curator restoration expert of the mission, and Ijat Rouzi next remove the painted pieces still intact in the hope of saving them.
Génial.
After months of restoration work resembling an impossible puzzle, the result is astounding. Faces of the Buddha emerge from chaos in the wake of nearly 20 centuries of neglect. Itinerant artists from northern India paid homage with their paintbrushes to a Buddhism close to its origins. Another scientific feat, the rebuilding of the sanctuaries. Thanks to careful handling of the collapsed wooden structure, they were able to reconstruct it. At the time of the Buddhist expansion toward China, such sanctuaries must have existed in all the oases of the Silk Route, facilitating exchanges and the mixing of men, raw materials and ideas.
Les grands explorateurs du début du siècle avaient trouvé des vestiges des époques historiques, la route de la soie. Notre idée, c'était de remonter le temps et de prouver qu'il y avait eu des gens qui s'étaient établis dans des oasis anciennes, maintenant complètement disparues dans les sables, bien avant l'époque de la route de la soie.
For 2 years, the mission explored the banks of an older delta of the Keria, but without much success. The clues were tenuous and too poorly preserved to give an idea of the life of the people before Caradong. A few bones, stone mill wheels, ceramic shards. The archaeologists are taking the road back when they notice a dark barrier on the horizon. As they approach, the line of an eroded rampart emerges from the dunes.
Le grand moment, ça a été la découverte de Jumbulakum. Et en plus, c'était pas une maison isolée ou un tas de tessons, c'était une ville avec une enceinte, un réseau d'irrigation autour, des tombes. Donc c'était un ensemble complet d'un seul coup. C'était plus un point sur la carte, mais toute une partie de vie qui se mettait à renaître.
They named this city Jumbulakum, meaning the round sands in the Uyghurian language. It's a site from the middle of the first millennium BC, nearly 800 years before Caradong. This extraordinary discovery opened a window onto an unknown past. The following days, a raw brick rampart several meters high and 2 enormous doors emerge from the sands. Soon, Joël Suire, the topographer, and Thibaut Fournet, the mission architect, have drawn up a map of the fortified city covering 10 hectares. Traces of ancient irrigation canals show an unexpected mastery of agricultural techniques well before the Chinese conquest. Grain silos containing millet, barley and wheat are evidence of a settled non-nomadic population. Within the walls, the archaeologists find the tool of farming and domestic life. Fur and plates with engraved decoration recalling the art of the existence of wolf and deer at the edge of the desert. Pottery. Granite mill wheels and sharpening stones. Combs for weaving and little wooden spindles all show this was a highly developed civilization. Even if time has tarnished their appearance, the finesse of the rarity of their imperfections and the variety of colors testify they were master weavers. For Sophie Desrosiers and Dominique Cardon, specialists in ancient textiles and dyes, the meticulous analysis of the fragments found in the tombs will allow a better understanding of this astonishing Iron Age culture. They're extremely impressed by the workmanship of this bootmaker. The researchers are struck by the mastery of the inhabitants of Jumbulakum at every level of craftsmanship. How did they get these colors? The red of this tunic, for example. Corinne, Dominique and Sophie decide to find out if the former inhabitants of Keria shared their know-how with other communities. A surprise awaits them in Chakchan, a great oasis on the Silk Route. The answers to some of the researchers' questions may lie in the modern landscape. Within a stand of trees side of the road, high-climbing plants with a special trait. Closer observation shows brilliant yellow dye near the base of their stalk. The dye the ancients used came from the roots of plants. And Dominique notices that these are definitely red. This madder root, used by dye makers and cultivated from Central Asia to Europe, allowed the inhabitants of the desert to obtain certain reds, still as vibrant as they were 25 centuries ago. Corinne discovers objects with animal designs in the archaeological reserves of Chakchan that are strangely similar to those of Keria. An analysis of the fabrics found in the tombs of the same period as Jumbulukum confirms that there was a common culture among the peoples of the region. In the bazaar, they find natural dyes that could have been in use 2,500 years ago. Dye-producing and medicinal plants were traditionally sold along with spices, but artificial dyes have since replaced them. Further along, the discovery of what are known as woad leaves, still used by women to color their hair, reveals the origins of the indigo blue of the fabrics of Jumbulakum. In Khotan, silk cocoons are unwound by hand at home, just as in the distant period of the Silk Route. Long believed that the textile culture of the region dated from the introduction of the silkworm by the Chinese at the beginning of our era. The discovery of Jumbulak Kum reveals the existence of traditions that are much older. Local craftsmen still weave materials of ikat, the local silk, using crafts that have not changed for thousands of years. The first step in the inquiry into the unknown history of these ancient people is complete. Thanks to her careful, detailed analysis of a few fragments, Sophie Desrosiers has been able to reconstruct the clothing of the inhabitants of Jumbulak Kum.
Voilà le résultat final, la tunique qui a été reconstituée avec des tissus modernes, les plus proches possibles de ceux qui avaient servi à faire l'original.
A large shroud made of serge found in one of the graves intrigues the researchers. Two skeletons, buried head to foot with arrowheads alongside. These two subjects are a real mystery. Their skulls bear the marks of several lesions made by weapons or cutting tools. Perhaps they were executed. But by whom? How? Why? The researchers have no answers for the moment. An enormous surprise awaits them. In the wake of a storm, a dune has been moved by the wind, and tombs surface right at ground level. One reveals its precious contents, the corpse of a mummy that seems to be intact. A few meters away, Idris and Corinne discover other tombs. Buried in poplar sarcophagi or in tombs with sides made of wood or reeds, these mummies sleeping in the sands for 2,500 years. The archaeologists have finally found the ancient inhabitants of the desert that they have been looking for these past 10 years. In all, 5 adult mummies are removed from their coat sand. The researchers must work fast to remove them before the next storm, but also handle the fragile corpses with infinite care so as not to damage them. The archaeologists find offerings in the coffins, a bowl of grain and cakes for the voyage into the beyond, and day-to-day objects for women, and an arrowhead or knife for men. A red shroud, sometimes decorated with glass beads, hides their faces. These mummies wear mittens and fur-lined coats, as though burial took place in winter. The archaeologists have prepared nothing for the transportation of such fragile remains. While they wrap them, the camel drivers go off to look for wood to make crates in Dahiyan, a 2-day walk from here. At the end of this exhausting mission, the caravan crosses the desert once again with its precious cargo for a 2,000-kilometer journey by camel and truck to the regional capital. One year later, Corinne is back in China with a team of researchers to study these mummies at the Institute of Archaeology, where Idris awaits them. For the first time ever, the scientists will be able to study Iron Age people taken from a city they lived in, the very city the scientists had discovered. The mummies still lie in the crates used to transport them across the desert. Corinne finds no odors emanating from this mummy. There is also a man with embroidered trousers. The researchers judge to be very well wrapped. There is a well-preserved, intact corpse of an older lady with a horn that Corinne is looking for.
C'est pour ça qu'il y a ce décrochement.
Ça, c'est pour ses genoux.
Ah, c'est pour les genoux. Oui, la tête est de ce côté-là.
Corinne and Dominique discuss the state of the bodies, most in very good shape, despite some decay.
Elles sont toutes entières, on ne les a pas touchées. Le fuseau avec la laine, il est quelque part là-dedans aussi. Je voudrais voir.
Ah oui, donc il y a tout l'ensemble.
Non, ça a l'air sympa.
Satisfied with how well these mummies are preserved, the team sets to work.
Ne t'inquiète pas, il y a du coton en dessous. Il y a une mousse. Attends, j'ai les mains qui tremblent.
They must first check to see that the jolting during the voyage hasn't damaged them. With the help of Idris and Nathalie Richard, a curator-restorer, Corinne removes the layers of protective covering that help safeguard the mummies during their transport. The tension in the laboratory is palpable as Nathalie makes the first cut. The better preserved the bodies, the more clues these researchers hope to recover.
Ça a bien tenu, hein, dis donc, pendant le voyage.
To everyone's great relief, this mummy survived the camel trek like a true adventurer. A new quest begins, this time in the laboratory. Corinne and Idris focus on the remains of a baby. In Jumbalak Kum, anyone deceased, even newborns, was buried in individual tombs. In the wake of their fieldwork, it's a rare opportunity for the members of the Franco-Chinese team to work side by side on these finds in the same lab. The unwrapping of the mummies sparks a visit from the local cultural directors. In this region, which has always been a land of intermixing, the question of origins remains a sensitive subject. The first mummy is a man of about 30, buried in the trunk of a whole poplar that's been dug out. In a region where wood has always been scarce, this form of burial seems to be a sign of privilege. Another mummy, found crushed under the roof of his tomb, is the most sumptuously dressed. This tall man is wearing a beautiful fur-lined coat in several colors of leather, with a patchwork belt and magnificently embroidered trousers. Even the researchers seem impressed by this ancient fashion statement. Little glass beads have been sewn on his shroud. Everything about him indicates that he is an important personage and suggests that Jumbalak Kum society was hierarchical. These mummies are laid on their backs, like most found in Taklamakan, with their capped heads resting on a pillow of vegetable fibers. But unlike most, these have red shrouds sewn on their caps to hide their faces. This one belongs to a young adult, about 25 years old. Attention turns to the mummy that had originally fascinated Corinne. She's not alone in her appraisal of this older woman's preservation. She's the oldest of the mummies found in Jumbalak Kum, a woman of about 60. It's an exceptional age for this population. Her copper diadem and splendid coiffure held in place by a long metallic horn, surely indicates that she was someone of influence. The researchers want to try to remove her veil, but it's not an easy task. They move it aside just a bit to have a look at the woman's cheekbones. But it's clear to all, this is going to take a great deal of preparation. Medical expert and anthropologist Annie Géraud begins work on the pierced skulls, while Eric Croubézy, anthropobiologist and a specialist in ancient DNA, proceeds with an exhaustive study of the 57 skeletons.
43.
Meanwhile, back in the other laboratory, work on the mummies continues. Handling the ancient leather is a delicate process. The fur coats and boots worn by these mummies confirms Eric's theories. The inhabitants of Jumbalakum were leather workers. A little vacuuming is necessary to really see the structure of the clothing. Bernadette Robbe, a fur and skin specialist of the civilizations of the Great North, thinks these desert people were experts in the subtle art of tanning.
On se rend compte que vraiment ils avaient une connaissance complète des matériaux. Ils allaient très loin dans la technique, ils font des points extraordinaires. Mais au niveau des peaux et fourrures, ils jonglent absolument sur toute la gamme. Ils arrivent à faire des décorations probablement avec du loup, pour ce qui est la partie toute fine noire. Donc vraiment une connaissance fine. Et puis les teintes, les couleurs et les poils courts d'autres animaux pour faire justement des contrastes de couleurs et de raffinement des choses.
It's a sense of refinement confirmed by the clothing of the crushed man. His embroideries show great finesse in their weave and impress the researchers by the beauty of their colors and motifs. Scrolled leafy designs inspired by Achaemenid Persia remind them of the frozen tombs of the Altai, the country of the Scythians, 1,200 kilometers further north. The fifth and final mummy of Jumbalakum is a case apart. Clothed in a simple tunic and woolen trousers, its face is covered with a shroud that is different from the others. Natalie and Corinne note that this is the one who was buried in different conditions from the others, without any offerings. There's something frightening about this one. The impressive number of his fractures intrigues the anthropologists. The mood is sober as the researchers evaluate what likely happened to this man. The impacts show that he was severely beaten. Not only were his limbs broken, but they are scarred by sharp tools, as if they wanted to cut him to pieces. He had clearly been tortured to death. With the help of an endoscope inserted in the clothing, Annie finds other fractures. But she cannot get at the rest of the body without causing irreversible damage. She tries to confirm whether this wound was caused by a sharp instrument or not. How can they determine their ages, their illnesses, and the causes of death of the mummies without destroying the furs and the bodies? 2 nights at the hospital in Urumqi will allow them to confront this challenge. With the help of the most sophisticated technology, the scientists will perform a virtual dissection of the mummies. They will create a 3-dimensional reconstruction from 1,500 cross-sections recorded with a scanner to observe the morphology and pathologies of each mummy. The scientists will be able to detect the presence of organs and determine whether the mummification is only a result of the dryness of the climate or, as in ancient Egypt, human intervention. They can see a wooden board under the pillow where the head lies.
Alors, tu vois, il y a quelque chose dans le crâne.
Il y a quelque chose dans le crâne, tu dis?
Il y a quelque chose dans le crâne, tu vois. Normalement, c'était du sable qui rentrait, tu vois.
Ah oui, au fond, là.
And something in the skull. As the scan proceeds, organs appear. The researchers think these might be abdominal organs, perhaps intestines. It's an exciting moment for the team.
C'est incroyable. Non, c'est beau.
The scanner confirms the absence of embalming techniques, but it also allows them to find anatomic anomalies. And the pierced skulls finally reveal at least part of their secret. These were two relatives, probably a father and son, who were killed by execution.
On a retrouvé en fait 14 impacts.
We found 14 blows, so, if you will, there are several things we can say. There are rounded apertures, certain of which are very regular. There are apertures that are quadrangular, and then there's this lesion, a rupture, which evokes a blow by an instrument like a sword or a blow by an axe.
Il y avait plein de pointes de flèches, plein de flèches en bois retrouvées sur le site. Bon, on sait que ces flèches ne servaient pas seulement pour la chasse, mais qu'il y avait au moins des conflits ou des règlements de compte assez sévères. Bon, c'est une période troublée, on le sait, dans toute cette région, entre les sédentaires, les nomades qui étaient tout autour. Probablement entre plusieurs groupes aussi. On a l'impression qu'il y a peut-être des tribus différentes, mais on peut parler presque de traces de guerre.
It's a violent world, confirmed when the face of the fifth mummy is unveiled. Under a tunic folded like a shroud, the grimacing features of a very young man are brought to light. The contractions of his face and snarling mouth convey the suffering he endured at the time of his death. The absence of a red shroud and fur coat confirm that this man was indeed treated differently. For the team gathered around his bedside, there is little doubt that this adolescent did not die in combat, but that he was tortured.
On a l'impression qu'elle est... Il y a un truc comme si c'était un bol coupé.
During the examination, Annie discovers a huge number of lesions under the hair. The hair had been carefully sewn on over the wounds during the funeral preparation. Annie and Corinne are shocked by the size of the wounds. Some look like strips, and others are giant round holes. Something has punctured them. Perhaps a weapon of stone, judging from the look of the skin around the wound. Eric strives to understand how and why this violence happened. There's a sense of frustration. Without knowing what deadly instruments were used, they can't recreate the scenario. At best, they can come up with a plausible hypothesis. Whether by axe or blow of a sword, what's clear to Eric is that the torture relentlessly increased in scale and invention, perhaps with instruments that hadn't been found at the dig.
Il aurait eu d'abord une série de traumatismes devant, sur les genoux, sur le crâne, et ensuite on le retourne, on frappe sur les cuisses et la partie postérieure de l'occipital. Si on imagine le scénario le plus court, parce qu'on a pu aussi le tourner dans un sens, puis dans l'autre, etc. Mais sur le scénario le plus court, c'est ça. Et encore une fois, avec plusieurs intervenants et plusieurs objets. Donc c'est des cas d'acharnement, si tu veux, sur un sujet. On ne peut pas savoir ce que c'est, mais peut-être il avait si tu veux, il fallait le punir, mais plus que le tuer. Donc, et plusieurs personnes sont intervenues. Ça peut pas se passer dans certaines communautés s'il enfreint certaines règles. Tu sais, chacun doit donner son
coup.
Chacun doit donner son coup.
After the revelations from the torture victim, the team decides to remove the shrouds of the other mummies. They have to be careful not to remove any skin by accident. Like a door shutting on them, the last thing to be placed on the deceased was a shroud of red cotton. It marked the passage from the world of the living to the world of the dead and was placed at the close of funeral preparations.
Je ne savais pas si la peau serait conservée. J'espérais trouver des traces de la préparation du corps, en fait, de la toilette mortuaire. Alors que là, l'étoffe a laissé une certaine humidité sur les chairs qui finalement finissent par former plus qu'un avec le tissu.
Removing the shroud of the crushed man, the researchers are once again surprised. This man appears to have a ring of gold leaf on his mouth, a rectangle with 2 holes. Typically, when researchers find these on mummies, they're sewn into clothing. They're delighted and think this find is in character with the man. It's the first time that a mouth cover in felt, decorated with a gold plate, has been found on a Taklamakan mummy. It's an astonishing find.
Tu peux me le tenir comme ça, parce que tu vois, il y a cette... un pli là.
Next, they'll study the older woman. They know that this woman spun wool because they found a fuséole and her wooden spindle in her sarcophagus. But the wear of her teeth also reveals that she worked with leather as well. There's a line going up to the eye and nose. And at first, Corinne thinks her cheek has been tattooed. But no, it's only paint. The infrared light highlights the painted motifs in red and yellow pigment on the cheeks of this old woman. They are geometric designs in the shape of chevrons and streaks. On the temples of 2 other mummies, a kind of coiling can be seen. Tattoos that have been half erased. Do these paintings concern the world of the dead or the living? The mummies of Charchan, contemporaries of those at Jumblakum, attest that this practice of painting was shared among the peoples of Taklamakan. Their motifs once again recall those of the frozen tombs of the Altai and underscore their relationship to the Scythians. But their symbolism remains elusive. Did they illustrate a particular status of these individuals, or were they made to protect them after death? In Shubishu, offerings of grains and meat found in the tombs of the same period confirm that these people of the desert were settled farmers and herders, but also horsemen and hunters, and they lived alongside the nomads traveling across the Taklamakan, people from whom they needed to defend themselves. A world of diverse ethnic origins emerges, covering a huge area from the desert to the steppes of the Altai and Mongolia.
Les grandes discussions, c'est toujours est-ce que ce sont des Européens, est-ce que ce sont des Chinois, etc. Et pendant longtemps, on considérait qu'il n'y avait pas de caractère asiatique chez ces sujets. En fait, on a trouvé des épaississements à l'intérieur de la mâchoire inférieure de la mandibule. Donc ça montre qu'il y avait déjà des mélanges entre populations. On peut même se demander, si tu veux, si à l'époque, il n'y avait pas déjà de temps en temps des sujets qui, en dehors des contacts qu'il y avait entre populations, de proche en proche, s'il n'y avait pas des sujets qui venaient de plus loin et qui s'implantaient ici.
This cultural intermingling perfectly summarizes the long history of a region situated on a caravan route of silk, jade and spices, destined for the rest of the world. A land in perpetual contact with nomadic tribes and the great neighboring empires of China and Persia, where numerous ethnic groups have always coexisted. The mission is complete. The Uyghur women who work in the museum have been invited to see the mummies before they are preserved in darkness, waiting for a future restoration mission to reawake them. Do these people believe in life after death? The offerings and objects found in their tombs would lead one to think so. But what were their beliefs? There is still a lot to discover about the inhabitants of the desert. But thanks to the 5 mummies of the Keria, they now have a face and history that the researchers are beginning to decipher. Corinne and the mission architect, Thibaut Fournet, try to depict the older woman as she existed late in her life, not carrying ritual offerings. Simply a woman with a cane, bent with age and living with arthritis, supported by the tall man at her side. This is how Thibaut imagines the inhabitants of Jumba Lakum looked like.
Un peu plus rouge, peut-être. Lui aussi, les traces de tannage, le truc.
They discuss who this individual might have been. Probably not a leather worker, according to Corinne. He was more likely a wealthy farmer or the head blacksmith, perhaps even a horseman or hunter.
Cavalier, chasseur. Non mais c'est très bien là comme ça.
Through the brush of the painter, the mummies become characters that take us back to the world of ancient Keria. "2,500 years ago, the bed of the river shifted toward the east, and its delta grew increasingly dry. Life in Jumba Lakum stopped. Now it's the quest for the origins of its inhabitants that the archaeologists want to explore."
Le futur, c'est avant Jumba Lakum, c'est les ancêtres des gens de Jumba Lakum ou les gens qu'ils côtoyaient.
所以说，对我们更进一步的了解克里亚河流域人类生态环境的变迁，对今后我们更进一步的了解这个克里亚河流域的这个古代历史。
Il est possible qu'il y ait un autre site très important, plus ancien, plus loin. Donc le futur, c'est essayer de rentrer de nouveau dans le blanc de la carte, puisque pour toute cette région, il n'y a pas de vestiges plus anciens.